Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of the series of videos that I'm doing on the Eagletree vector. If you've not already seen it, I would advise having a look at part 1 where I've set up the receiver and the transmitter to communicate to the vector itself. I'm using S-bus mode. It's very similar principle for all of them, and in that video I run through the RX wizard. I've also done an unboxing video so you can take a look at it, and in video 1 I show the setup of how I've got my kind of test rig together for all of this to happen. So in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the mode switches, talk about each one of them, what they all do, and also set up the sub mode switch. After that we're going to go down the route of having a look at some of the extra features and the other menus in the software, and following on from that I'm going to do some videos looking at the OSD and what options and customization you can do, because there's loads of things that you can do on it and it's one of the main selling points for the vector itself. Following after that, the intention is going to be to do some videos on setting it up using the stick menus through the OSD screen itself, so not using the computer, and hopefully after that it's going to be a maiden. So anyway, on with the next video here, and subscribe if you want to see the rest of them. Okay, so with the receiver and the transmitter all set up, now what we've got to do is do some tweaking on the switches. You've got the mode switch and you've got the sub mode switch. Obviously sub mode is optional to you. I've set it up so I've got a 2 switch set up. So on the RC configuration screen you can see on the right hand side here that we've got the various switches and what they do. At the moment it sort of defaults to having the mode switch to have 2D no hold, 2D no hold, and then 3D plus heading hold. Now the manual gives you a bit more description of what all of these do, but basically 2D no hold, what that's going to do is it's going to stabilize the aircraft. So it's using the gyroscopes to stabilize the aircraft in level flight. You obviously have to set level flight, you have to tell it what level flight is going to be before you fly the aircraft, or you just got to train the vector on how to do it. And then when you have it in 2D no hold mode, all it's going to do is it's going to continue flying straight. So it's going to use the elevator, it's going to use the pitch to roll to combat any turbulence, movement, anything like that. Obviously it's not going to fly the plane completely for you if you drop the throttle to nothing, but it is going to keep it stable, and it does work very well from that point of view, assuming it's the same as the Guardian 2D 3D which I've got. So what I want for my purposes is to decide what I want to have on my mode switch on this side, and then the sub mode switch is usable. Now the sub mode switch is only accessed and usable if you select 2D plus sub mode. It's completely obsolete unless you do that. So obviously that's quite important to remember. So from my point of view, what I want to do is when I turn my transmitter on, I have all my switches at the up position. That's kind of my fail-safe, as it were, to know that I am in flight ready mode. Now in flight ready mode I want to know that I've got at least some stabilization. So I'm going to say that when I turn my transmitter on, I want to have 2D, so stabilized, with no heading hold. So that's to say it's going to stabilize the aircraft, but it's not going to keep an altitude hold, and it's not going to keep it flying in the same direction. That's all fine. So in mode 2, what I'm then going to have is I'm going to have 2D plus sub mode. So when I'm in mode 2, so when I flick the switch down to the middle position, what that's going to give me is it's going to give me access to 3 more positions on the sub mode switch. Now in mode 3 I'm flying a Skywalker. I'm not going to need 3D, it's not a 3D plane. What that would allow me to do is all sorts of stunts and craziness. It's fantastic. I've seen videos of it. If you haven't, have a look at it. Really good for 3D pilots, but not very useful for a big FPV flyer. So obviously I'm not going to have that. So now I've got to decide what I want to have. Now I could choose to have loiter or return to home test, gyro stabilization, which is very similar. It just keeps the plane flying level. You've got a display off. That will actually turn the OSD off, which could be useful for some people. If you've got a lot of information and you like to just fly with it off. What I'm yet to discover is what happens to the actual stabilization whilst that's happening. So I'm not going to choose that for the moment. What I am going to do is I like a bit of manual control. So I'm going to choose that if I have my mode switch as position 3, that my plane is going to be my own to fly. So stabilization completely off. So then all I've got to do is on the sub mode switch, I've got to decide that when my mode switch is in position 2, as it is there, and you can see I've just flicked it over, which means it's dropped down to position 2. what are my other 3 modes going to be? Now, you're limited slightly on the choice here. You've got not used at all, you've got no hold, and no hold basically means that it's in 2D no hold mode. That is to say, it's going to stabilize the plane, but it's not going to keep a course, it's just going to fly straight and true, but it will be influenced by wind. It will not hold altitude, it will just fly straight as long as it can. You've got hold mode, which is then to say that it will remember the altitude, it will remember which direction it's flying, and it will continue in that, and it will be stabilized. You've got loiter mode, which is to say as soon as you flick it into that, all it's going to do is it's going to say, right, the GPS position I was in when that switch was flicked is the position that I'm now going to circle around. So all it will do is it will go into a steady circle mode. It will use stabilization, and perfect if you just want to do something. If you drop something, flick it into loiter mode, it will just fly around over wherever it is. And obviously you've then got return to home test, which is actually going to put it into a return to home. So for me, what I want to have, I want to know that if I've got it in mode 1, that I've got no hold, so that is to say that actually it's doing exactly the same as just having it in mode 1 on my mode 1 switch, so that's just going to keep it stabilized. I would like to have loiter as my second mode switch, so if I want to do anything, all I've got to do is make sure that I'm in mode 2 on the left hand switch and that in mode 2 on the right hand switch, and it's going to do a circle. And then the chicken switch, return to home test, is going to be third. So if for whatever reason I can't see it, I lose signal, anything happens, obviously if my VTX goes down and I can't see out of the plane and I'm miles away from me, I want to be able to flick it into that. I don't want to have to turn my transmitter off, flick it into that, and it's going to come home. So that's the basics of setting up the switches. You can see also just to the right of that you've got your gain knob. I need to do a reverse on this because actually when I turn it to the left it goes to the right and right to the left, so that's no problem there, so I'll reverse that. And I've also got flaps, which at the moment it's a 3-pole switch but it's set to on or off, so it might need a bit of tweaking on that. I don't have flaps, probably not going to use them. So that's the basics of doing these switches for the fixed wing flight. The difference between fixed wing and multi-rotor is quite a lot with these switches and what they do. When I set my multi-rotor up, like I say, I'm probably going to do a tricopter, I will endeavour to play around with these and I'll tell you a little bit more of what they do when you're in a multi-rotor compared to what they do when they're on fixed wing. The other thing that you need to remember is that certain things like loiter and return to home, you've got to have the GPS and compass active, and that's something that at the moment, if I go into overview, I'm going to apply those changes. If I go to overview, at the moment it's not configured, so I need to go to compass and setup, enable magnetic compass. That is something that does have to be enabled, and you can see as soon as you do it, once you've done it, you've got to go out to the field just like you do most GPS craft, and you've got to do a compass dance to let it know where magnetic north is, otherwise you're going to have problems, it's going to fly horribly, it's going to crash, bad things are going to happen. I'm just going to disable that for a moment. When you're flying fixed wing, you don't have to use the magnetic compass, it will just use gyro stabilization, but it means that you're not going to have return to home, you're not going to have loiter mode available to you, so just bear that in mind. And also if you are using the magnetic compass, you need to make sure it's calibrated for all of that to work. So that's the end of dealing with the switches. We'll continue with a few more options in a moment.